So I'm just going to do a little video now to show you a couple of things about fractions, decimals, percentages. So mainly going to focus in this first video about how to convert between them, and then I'm also going to upload a separate video looking at how to find the percentage of an amount using a calculator. So we're just going to jump straight in. Here's what we're going to kind of look at today. So one of the key skills is in maths is being able to convert between them. Think of it like a little circle. So obviously being able to switch between any of them. One of the arrows I missed out is obviously we should be able, basically you should be able to go from any one to any of the other ones. Percentages to decimals, from fractions to decimals, decimals to percentages, and back and forth in between those. So let's kind of jump in, and you'll hear me talking a bit about FDP, F for fraction, D for decimal, and P for percentage. So let's look at the first one. Feel free to take notes in your book or to pause the video at any point or to rewind, go back, etc. So the first one we're going to look at is how to do 3/40 as a decimal. Now I chose this one because it's a bit annoying and it's a bit of a mean one. Now I'm going to show you two methods for this. First of all, there is a nice easy calculator method. So if you were doing this on a calculator, then when we think about the fraction 3/40, think of a fraction as a division. So think of it as 3 divided by 40 as opposed to 3/40. And if you type that into the calculator, then it will give you your answer. If you were doing this without a calculator, I'm not going to put the answer down yet, we'll do them all at the end. Okay, what you can do is try and make your fraction into something out of 10 or out of 100 or 1,000 or so on. So I might say, okay, well I know that 3/40, and I'm going to bend the rules a little bit here. If I have 3/40, I could divide it by 2 to get something out of 20. That would give me 1.5, and that's okay for now. It's a bit slow to catch up the screen, but we'll carry on with it. Then I know if I multiply that by 5, I'll get a fraction out of 100. Once I've got 7.5 out of 100, well, I know that if I write that down, I've got 7.5, and dividing by 100 is like moving the decimal point 2 places back. That's what happens when you divide by 100. So we've got this 7 and a 5. The decimal point has moved back to here, and then I just fill in the empty spaces with zeros. And that is how I can get my decimal to a fraction. And similarly, if you were to do this on your calculator, you type in 3 divided by 40, you press equals, and it will give you the same answer, 0.075. Okay, so that's fractions to decimals, or F to D. Okay, let's keep going. So now we're going to look at how to go from a fraction to a percentage. Now, think about how we've just done this one here, okay? Decimals to percentages is really straightforward, so we can follow the same rule for percentages, or very similar. Percentages, if you always remember that a percentage is a fraction out of 100. So if you can make your fraction you have into a fraction out of 100, then the percentage is just the numerator, the number on the top. So again, if you've got a calculator, there is a nice easy way we can do it. We know if we do 5 divided by 60, like we did before, it will give you your decimal, and all you need to do, new to that, is times it by 100. And you do this on your calculator, and you type it all in, and it gives you your answer. Now, of course, 5 divided by 60 is not the easiest without a calculator. Okay, just so you know. If you do this here, it's going to give you 8.3, and then it's going to be 3, and it's going to keep doing lots of 8.3s. So we're just going to do it to 2 decimal places, 8.33%. If you were to do this as a fraction without a calculator, it's a little bit harder. And don't worry, you're not going to get any of this challenging today without a calculator. So you'd say, okay, well, I'm going to do 5/60 again. And I'm going to try and make this into something which can go into 100. So I might try, let's say 10. Now, of course, that's going to give me a slightly annoying one because it's going to give me 5/6, but that's okay for now. And then when we get that over 100, because we've times by 10, Then you get 50. Ooh, no. Over 6. So then you have to do a little bit of long division. So we say, how many times does 6 go into 5? Well, it doesn't, but there's 5 remainder. How many times does 6 go into 50? Well, it goes in 8 times, because 8 times 6 is 48, which means there's 2 left over. 6 goes into 20 3 times, with 2 left over, and it keeps going on, obviously, forever. So we get our answer of 0. Sorry, yeah, I was right the first time. 8.33%. Okay, so I've picked hard examples. You'll probably get ones that will be a bit easier when you're practicing today. Okay, let's keep going. 0.34 as a fraction. When you were doing this in like column method, you'll remember you talked about like tens and units and tenths and hundredths, and you had a little decimal point there. So of course this would be a 0 units, 3 tenths and 4 hundredths. 3 tenths is 3 over 10. 4 hundredths is 4 over 100. But we need to put those together to make a fraction. Well, 3 tenths could also be written as 30 over 100. And now we can take these two and we can see how many hundredths we have. That sounds all very confusing, but there's a much easier way we can do it. We look at the decimal and we say that we have 2 digits. Yep, 2 digits after the decimal point. 2 digits, just like 100 has 1 with 2 zeros. So we can then say, well, we've got 2 digits, 3 and 4, and that means we're going to need 100, 2 zeros. But, of course, we can divide both those numbers by 2 to get 17 over 50, and that is our answer. Okay. What about if we wanted to make it into a percentage from a decimal? Well, here again, this is probably the easiest one of all of them if you have a calculator, and even if you don't. All you have to do is times by 100, because we know percentages mean out of 100. So we take 0.071 and we times it by 100. Now if you have a calculator, you just type that in. If you don't, you take the decimal point and you move it 2 places to the right, or you move the digits to the left, depending on which way you think about it. So the decimal point's now between the 7 and the 1, and you've got 7.1%. Okay. And similarly, going the other way, now we're going backwards. When we went from a decimal to a percentage, we times by 100. So to go the other way, for a calculator or non-calculator, we simply divide by 100. So again, we take our digits, 2, 7, 2, decimal points here at the moment. Before we went to the left, now we're going to go to the right. So we say 1, 2 places. So we've now got, oh no, ignore that. We're not going to do that. We're going to go to the left. We went to the right before. We're going to go to the left this time. What am I on about? We're going to go to the left. So now, that's what happens when you're trying to write and talk. It can, we've got the decimal point here. We've got the 2 and the 7 and the 2. And we add the 0 at the beginning. And that's our answer. And obviously, if you had your calculator, you would have just typed that in. And finally, 0.38% as a fraction. First thing you do, now this is a bit of a weird one, when you want to go from a percentage and you want to end up with a fraction, best thing you can do is a middle stage where you change it to a decimal. So we take our 0.38, and if you remember, the first thing we need to do is times that by 100. Nope. We do not want to times it by 100, that was a lie. We want to divide it by 100. It's the writing and the pen. And so we divide it by 100, and if we do that, that's going to give us our decimal. So that gives us 0.0038. Now again, we count, just like we were doing with the decimal to a fraction, we look at the digits. We've got 4 digits, which means we need 4 zeros. We count the 0, we still include these, okay, still include them. Don't just think, oh, I've got 38, that's 2 digits. It's all the ones after the decimal point. So you've got 38 over 10,000, and we see if we can simplify, which we can. We divide it by 2, and we get 19 over 5,000. And 19 is a prime number, so that is our answer. Okay, and that, so I've given you some quite hard examples there, but hopefully that will set you up for some of the more challenging questions you might see today. So you can obviously go back and recap and review and rewatch any of these we've done, but all 6 of these are what we're looking at today. Some of them are easy with a calculator, some of them aren't. So before we go any further, hopefully you've now taken that on board. What I'd like you to do is to pause this video, try these 6, write them down, and then when you finish all 6, you can play and see the answers. Okay, so that should be enough time. So hopefully you've tried them, and the answer you were looking for were as follows. So you wanted 27% for the first one, so you just times it by 100. Next one, we've got 9, 2 digits, 9 over 100, and 9 is not able to divide by anything, a common factor of 100. You've then got 9 over 75, that becomes 3 over 25, 12 over 100, 12%. Or if you've got a calculator, 9 divided by 75 times 100. 17 over 40, same thing. We've got that. It's okay to have a decimal here. That's kind of fine. Don't worry about it. Okay, if you've got that decimal here. And even if you've got a decimal here, you can just carry it down 42.5%, 0.425. Then again, we've got 12 over 100. Simplify it when you can. Don't forget to simplify with that. And finally, we divide it by 100. Move that decimal point 2 places to the left. Okay, so the last thing we said we were going to do was how to do some simple percentages of amounts. So for example, if we wanted to find 34% of, let's say 600, or 72.1% of 90, let's say. Now these are going to be calculator questions, so I'm going to show you a calculator method. I'm just going to write that on the side. This is a calculator method. So when you've got your calculator, the easiest thing for you to do, and this is something that works on all calculators, I know many of them have a percentage function, but I know all calculators will be able to do what I'm about to show you. So first thing we do is say, well, this 34%, not every calculator can type it in. But even if you have like a basic, I don't know, phone calculator like this, like just a little phone calculator, then you can still do 34% as a decimal. So the first thing you do is you divide by 100 to get our percentage as a decimal. Again, divide by 100 and it gives you 0.721. This here we call a decimal multiplier, and this is a very important concept in the percentages work that we're going to do after half term. Okay? End of term, not half term. So this is called a decimal multiplier, and the reason we call it a multiplier is because it just means that we multiply by our number. So percentage as a decimal, and then you times it on your calculator. 0.34 times 600, and that gives you, if you do this correctly, 204. If I wanted to work out 72.1% of 90, again, make it into a decimal, use your calculator, times it together, 0.721 times 90, and it gives you 64.89. And that's it. Finding a percentage amount with a calculator is very straightforward. The most important thing to always remember is that you do this step first. You divide by 100 to get your percentage of the decimal. It's called a multiplier because you multiply by the amount. Okay, so we're going to try and practice some of those now. Same as before, if you can do a little practice. So let's try 3 together. Let's do 52% of 90. Let's make that question A. Let's do 61% of 12. And let's do 3.4% of €6.50. Okay, so pause and try these, and then we'll see how that goes. Okay, if you've done that correctly, then let's just check the answers. You should have got the first one, you should have got 46.8 by doing 0.52 times 90. The next one, you should have done 0.61 times 12. And this gives you 7.32. And finally, you should have done 0.034 times 6.5 or 6.50. Doesn't matter, you'll get the same answer either way. Now this would have given you 0.221. But of course you can't have 0.221 euros, so you should have rounded it to 0.22. So when you've got money, it's always to 2 decimal places. Okay? And those are your answers. So have a go at these, see how they go, and we're going to focus mainly on those main skills on the down there, and let me know if you have any questions. Bye.